Today on Muddybeards 4x4, we're going to try out some weld-through primer. Welcome to Muddybeards 4x4. I am Robbie, and today we're going to be conducting an experiment with a product that I have never used before, and that is weld-through primer. Now, I've had lots of comments that suggesting that I use weld-through primer on some of the projects that we do here on this channel, and it's never something that I've used before because honestly it kind of goes against my experience as a welder, which is where when I go to weld on metal, I want it to be clean, bare metal, ground down to bare metal, wiped down so that I can get off any kind of oil or impurities, anything that could affect the weld's ability to adhere to the metal, to penetrate, and to avoid any kind of porosity. So the idea of spraying some paint over the metal kind of goes against my experience, but since so many people have suggested this, and I can think of quite a few applications where this might be really cool to use, I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot to see how well it really works. Now, in order to conduct this experiment, I went ahead and cut out a couple pieces of 1/8" steel, so I have a couple coupons here. This one here on the left is how I would normally prep metal for welding. It's ground down to a nice clean metal. I wiped it down with some acetone to get rid of any films or oils, and this stuff is good to go. Here, this piece in the middle, I did the same process. I cleaned it up down to bare steel, wiped it down, but then I sprayed it with some of this PBE weld-through primer. And this last piece is kind of a control. This is dirty steel, still has the mill scale on it. There's actually a little bit of rust on it and everything like that. And I want to lay down a bead on this as well, just to kind of compare. Now, the welder that I'm going to be using for this experiment is a Hobart 190. It's a great entry-level 220-volt machine. I'm going to be using some 75-25 mixed gas, 030 wire, and I'm just going to be using the suggested settings from inside the box for 1/8" steel. Now, to keep everything as similar as possible, I'm going to be using the same technique, the same length of weld, so we can truly compare the outcome. Well, let's now check out the results. So we have all 3 coupons here. We laid down a similar bead using the same settings on the welder. Here is the clean bare steel. And this looks like a pretty good weld. I'm pretty happy with it. One little spot right here where that was probably my fault. I got a little bit too close to the metal, but this is a good, clean, uniform weld. You can see the transfer of heat very good with the rainbowing across. If I flip it over, you can clearly see that I got good penetration. There's no real visible porosity. And this is a good weld to me. Now, here is the weld-through primer. Now, it's a little harder to tell because obviously the weld melts where you laid down the bead, but a couple signs maybe of a little bit of porosity. But as I was welding, you know, the puddle looked the same as this, and I was actually really surprised. And when we talk about transfer of heat, again, you can clearly see that this is penetrating very well. So I'm pretty happy with that. There was a little bit more splatter with this, and maybe we can talk about why that happened after we conduct a little bit more of the experiment. And then this is the dirty steel, or at least still has mill scale, a little bit of rust, and actually this turned out pretty good. There's definitely some little pockets of porosity in it for sure, and that's because I'm sure there was some contamination in the weld, but overall that one actually turned out pretty well. Pretty good as well. It is a little bit more built up than the other ones, like almost like it was colder, but still I got some good heat penetration. So I'd actually like to throw down one more pass here and see what the results are again, and then we might try this out on a little bit thicker steel to see if we're still getting good heat penetration. Now that second go around, and again, you know, I'm pretty happy with the results. That weld through primer just does not really seem to be affecting the weld very much. And this is a good, clean weld. Not seeing a lot of porosity. It lays down well, got really good heat penetration. It's still kind of hot. I mean, I'm gonna have to have a little grace maybe from the internet welding experts here on my quality of a weld here, but I am really happy. And if you compare it with the clean metal to this metal, it looks really similar. Again, my dirty metal is honestly not that bad, but there's definitely a couple spots of some porosity here, and it is, again, taller, but still is actually getting pretty good penetration. It's really not that dirty, it just has a lot of mill scale on it. But now that we've tried this, I'd like to know how well this works on a little bit thicker material. Now what we have here is actually a piece of 1/4 inch C channel, but the reason why I'm trying it is I wanted to try out a piece that's a little bit thicker, 1/4 inch steel. Now this is actually getting close to the upper capacity of my welder anyway, but to really test out that if we're getting good penetration, you know, if this weld through primer is affecting the penetration, I wanted to try it out on a little bit thicker steel. Well, here are the results now on 1/4 inch. Now, I ran a few different passes and tried a couple of different things. This one right here, well, this one I kind of messed up on. Sorry, internet welding experts. But my first pass, I think it was a little cold, and it's built up a lot. And I wasn't really happy with it, so I went back and I turned up the heat a little bit. Now, this is 1/4 inch, so it's not super surprising to me. And here is with a little bit hotter welds. So this one turned out pretty darn well though. Again, the welds seem to lay down really nice. The puddle looks really good from underneath the hood, and I cannot tell that there's any sort of coating on this. Now here, I spent a little bit more time and I went slower, and it definitely got some good penetration. And so I do not think that this weld through primer is affecting the penetration. Now I can say that it does splatter a lot more. I'm getting a lot of slag buildup, but because of the primer, I think it comes right off. It actually rubs right off with my fingers super easy. So there is that, but all in all, I would say this works pretty good. So after laying down a few welds, I have to say I'm pretty impressed. I did not seem to notice too much of a difference when welding on plain steel or bare steel than welding on steel with this weld through primer applied to it. Now, I am not the most professional welder, which I'm sure I'll get a comment somewhere down in the comments about, you know, about my weld quality, but you know, at my skill level especially, you would think that anything like this could really start to mess with your welds, and I just did not see that. It seemed to lay down just fine, and I'm pretty confident and happy with the way that these welds turned out. So I'm confident in using this product, but I guess the real question is when and why would you use this product? Because I just don't think it's necessary for every application. You know, if you're fabbing something up, you got it down to plain steel, you got it prepped, you weld it, and then you get a good coat of paint over the top of it, I just don't see why you would need to use this. Where I think this would be really applicable is something like with body work or with, say, plug welding. You know, where you want to protect that base metal and you got it prepped and cleaned, and then you put a piece over it and you do a plug weld. It would be nice to have this on the base metal underneath, where you're not going to be able to reach it with paint after you're done with the welding process, and this is going to protect that base metal from rust and corrosion. Again, something where you might be doing overlapping, where you're welding something that's overlapping, that piece that you won't be able to paint afterward, it'd be good to have the protection of this against any kind of corrosion. Now, according to the internet, this weld through primer also helps protect the weld joint itself. So if you're welding a joint, as you weld, this melts, and then as the weld cools, that zinc coating and everything actually protects the weld joint itself from corrosion and rust. So I think there are some benefits with this, and I'm excited to be able to use it in a couple applications. So if you like the product, you can go check this out. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can buy this from our Amazon store and try it out for yourself. If you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel if you're not already. And I'm sure there'll be some comments because this is on welding and welding technique and welding processes. So let's keep it professional. And if you have any experience with weld through primer, if you want to add your experience or your expertise, throw a comment down below and let's get a good thread going. All right, until next time, we'll see you on the trail.